Hi, my name's Tim Johnson. This is a follow-up to the last video I made on painkiller addiction, and this one is about, I want to share my experiences of where this addiction can take you and the dark places it can take you to. Whatever your circumstances are, whoever you are, whether you're a housewife, whether you're a top-level businessman, whatever your situation is, young, old, male, female, it doesn't matter. This addiction can take hold of anybody. It is so easy to fall into, and as I explained, I'm not going to go into the medical stuff like I did in the last video about how it affects your brain and the feelings it gives you, but suffice to say that, and I'm talking about opioid painkillers in particular, suffice to say that it's a very seductive feeling, the feeling of euphoria. Now, when you take these, of course, these painkillers have a massive usefulness, whether you've had an operation, whether you're in constant back pain, neck pain, whatever it is, it makes your life extremely miserable. So obviously, when taken properly and following instructions, they can make life much more tolerable. Obviously, you know, they're a very useful tool in a doctor's armory and a hospital's armory. You know, it's there's no question about that. But the problem is, it's always people. You know, when you're not in those situations, people can fall into this trap. And as I did, if you've got issues going on in your life in particular, if you take these things properly, then you don't get this sort of euphoria and buzz. But sometimes you do, and then you experiment a bit, and or the pain hasn't gone away, so you take a bit more, or you take a few more pills, and then you get this buzz, this euphoria, which is extremely seductive, and you fall into this trap, as I did, particularly if you've got other issues going on in your life, as I did at the time, and I was unhappy with myself, and had a lot of unresolved past pain and a lot of unresolved issues, and when I took these pills in excess, or I took a few extra, it gave me this massive feeling of euphoria, energy, and I could conquer the world, and the pain dissolved, the emotional pain dissolved, and I could cope with anything, and using them as a coping mechanism without even realizing it. And as I say, before I got into sort of doctor shopping and prescriptions and stuff like that, because I couldn't get hold of Solpadol, which was and Cocodamol and stuff like that, you know, the stronger ones, I used to go to and get Nurofen Plus from the chemist, which are on sale in any chemist in Britain. And there's supposedly a duty of care there, where if they notice that you're coming in quite regularly, then they'll question you on why you're buying them and can stop you buying them. But you know, I used to change and swap around. There was 2 or 3 chemists around me, and I used to buy these Nurofen Plus, and found that I was taking more and more of them, and for the reasons I explained in the last video, they took hold of me, and I found that I was having to take them, as you do with any opioid eventually. And this happened in a period of probably a month, I would say, of taking these things, from taking them normally to starting to abuse them to get this euphoria and this rush, and then having to take more to try and achieve that same rush, which for reasons I explained in the last video, you never do. Then becoming dependent on them was for probably 4 weeks. And then it really started to take hold, in as much as I was getting stopped buying them in certain chemists, because obviously I was buying the packs of 32 Nurofen Plus in particular. But this is Solpadine, Nurofen Plus. I mean, there's lots of different types of these things. But I used to take the Nurofen Plus because they had the strongest amount. But now Solpadine Plus and things like that, they all do the same amount of codeine in the pills. So anyway, I was taking so many of these things and shopping around, then having to drive before even my working day started. I knew that I was going to have to get from somewhere a couple of packets of these, and that's 12 to 14 pounds a day just on buying the thing to start with. That's just money to start with. And then having to drive far afield to camp without even realising this was going on. This was taking hold of me. and to drive to different chemists who would sell me them because they didn't know me, further afield and further afield. You know, and this went on, and it was escalating and escalating, and you know, I found that that wasn't. So I ended up, after a period of time of desperation, because if I didn't have these pills, if I didn't take like 15 or 20 at the beginning of the day, I couldn't work and nothing. And this is absolute fact. I mean, this was I was going into withdrawal because I was dependent on them. So I realised that I needed something stronger, and ended up making up a back pain and getting to the doctors. And this was in the sort of late 90s, I suppose, early 2000 maybe. You know, they were prescribing more readily, and poor doctor. I mean, I was making this stuff up and escalating and escalating. It started off, they prescribed Solpadol, which is a 30 milligram codeine, and equivalent to oxycodone and things like that, Percocet. And then it escalated because that wasn't enough for me. And eventually it got up after trying fentanyl patches, which were no good. I ended up on MST, which is morphine sulfate tablets, and got to the highest dose of those until they realised that I was doctor shopping, if you like. I was conning them. But without these things, I was taking such a massive quantity because my brain had shut down by this time, as I explained in the last video. Now, please subscribe and like these videos if you can, because there's loads of information on my channel, 140 videos where you can find out how to get off these safely, and alcohol safely, because this has always been a massive problem. That was always a massive problem. That was lurking in the background anyway. But that escalated and escalated. As if you look back at my life story, I'll tell that story. My videos will tell you how to withdraw safely, how to taper down, how to get through early recovery. Lots of information. So if you want to subscribe, then have a look at those. But as I say, once I'd got to that level where I was taking morphine sulfate, I then, when they stopped prescribing me because they realised I was desperate, and I ended up illegally smoking heroin, and that's what led me to my first rehab, into rehab. And but it never, because I never resolved any of the issues that were causing this, because it was a deep-seated unhappiness and past pain and past stuff, unresolved stuff, which I won't go into now in this video. There was a gap inside of me, and I was using these, but eventually it wasn't even about that. It was just the fact that my brain and my body needed these pills just to function on a day-to-day basis. Otherwise I would slip into withdrawal and couldn't function with no energy. It would be awful, a horrible feeling, as you all know who've been through it. So smoking heroin, then came rehab. But then it just, because I never dealt with any of those issues in rehab, as I say, I ended up eventually get addicted to tramadol, another insidious drug, and I've made a video on that on this channel, which is well worth a look because it tells the truth about that drug. The point I'm trying to make from this video is, it doesn't matter what your situation is, you can start taking these Solpadine, Nurofen Plus, or the equivalent in America, if you're in America, and that. You can start taking it for genuine reasons of pain, and then you might have other issues going on or not, or you might just like the feeling. You might be seduced by the feeling that they give you, find that you can't achieve that, and start taking more and more and more, and that's how quickly it can escalate. Within a month you can be right in the shit, right in trouble, and it'll lead you into dark places, it'll lead you into theft, it'll lead you into selling everything and losing your job, career, family, health, self-respect, dignity. Everything goes out the window with these things. And it sounds as though I'm exaggerating, but I know, and if you can look anywhere, there's millions of people suffering from this at the moment. A lot of people are hiding it from their friends and families and loved ones because they feel, I'm not a junkie or whatever. They don't equate it to sort of heroin and crack and all those drugs, that sort of addiction. It's not equated to that. It's it's respectable because I'm going to the chemist and buying them over a counter, but it isn't it isn't. It's the same thing. It's codeine. It's a pure form of opiate. It's a pure form of the poppy, opium poppy. Codeine and morphine, the two only pure forms of the poppy. and everything else is man-made, as I said in the last video. So please seek help if you feel as though you're in this trap, because if you're in the early days of this, it's much easier, obviously, to it's not easy, but it's much easier to taper down and withdraw if you carry on. And you may have to continue taking these pills for pain, and I totally understand that, because no one wants to be in pain. Of course they don't, of any sort, emotional or physical pain. But be aware of it, and just be aware of how many you're taking, and that you're not abusing them, because it's so easy to fall into that trap, and so quick. It'll grab hold of you before you know it, and it will kill you, because when it's taken everything else from you, it will come back for you. It'll come back for you. It'll come back and claim your life, and claim everything that you have. So that's it anyway. Carpe Diem. Seize the day. Make today the day that you seek help from painkiller addiction. Much love to you all. Thank you.